Okay, so the next part that we're going to do is we're going to throw on the supercharger onto the motor. I've got my assistant here. She's going to help me get this up onto the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and switch cameras to overhead view so y'all can see better what we're doing as we're installing this. So I'm going to get this off of my head, get this put up, and then get some video of the overhead shot. This will be a little bit easier for me to get this into the engine bay. You got it? I can just set it and rest it there. All right, stop there. You got it? Go ahead and get it inside the engine bay.
I'll need to reach.
It's fine. Okay, hold on. There's some stuff out of the way. Let's see if I can get this other piece back in. Where did it go? All right, so for the next part, we're gonna get these short bolts in the corners and then get them hand tight. We're gonna need some blue Loctite. So let's get those installed and then we'll get the interior bolts installed. Okay, so after we got the supercharger base put down and the 4 corner bolts hand tight, we're going to get this last bolt into the supercharger bracket. It's going to go up top here. So we're going to thread that in, and that's going to be torqued to 22 foot-pounds. Okay, now for this next part is, once you have the O-rings installed on the bolts for the supercharger, we're going to get these put in, blue Loctite, and then there is a specific torque order. So you're going to do 2 passes, one at 88 inch-pound and the second at 106. Not gonna lie, this number 9 is so hard to get to that I'm just gonna have to do it by feel and hopefully get it torqued down properly. All the rest of them I can get to. That one has been a real pain in the butt. So let's get these installed. Okay, so once you've actually managed to tighten this down, which was a son of a bitch, you're gonna go and behind there where you install the fuel rail nipples on the back, you're gonna install the fuel crossover line. So this is just gonna connect to those nipples that we installed on the fuel rails, and then we're gonna slide those over, and it's just gonna be pressed to click. All right, so this is just getting on the rear. Also the 90 degree. This one's a 45. This is gonna go on the driver's side. So this is driver's side. All right, once we have that crossover tube installed in the rear, you're gonna connect the map extension connector to the map sensor that is in the supercharger. I actually already ran that, so mine is already plugged up. I just found it easier to run that now and get that hooked up and up out of the way. So I'm just going to go and plug in the 2 fuel injector pigtails to the stock harness on both sides, and then we'll move over to the pigtail for the throttle body. All right, got that installed. Now we're gonna run the pigtail for the throttle body. I think that's gonna loop under and come under here. I'm gonna take a look. Or actually, it's right there. Oh, let's see. All right, so this is the throttle extension wiring harness, and it will say throttle extension on the tag. So this is gonna go and connect into here, and then lock it, and then it says to run it underneath the throttle bracket. Actually, I think this way is going to be easier. Okay, that is easier. So fish it through with the small end first, the female end through, I don't know, let's see. So underneath and through until you hit this connection. So this is going to go this way, and it'll keep it up and out of the way of the belt. And that will stay up out of there, so that way it doesn't hit the belt. And it shows to zip tie it, but we'll keep it loose for now so we know which way it's going. But it looks like it's zip tied somewhere up in here. I think the throttle, I think it's this way, or maybe it's this way. Anyways, get that done up and out of the way, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, the next step is going to be reinstalling the water pump pulley, and I'm actually going to jack my truck up. It'll just be easier. So we'll get that installed, and I believe it's 14 pound-feet to torque them down. All right, it says to torque them down, but there's no belt on there, so there's no way that I'm gonna be able to get it torqued properly. So I'm just gonna tighten them down, and then we'll torque them down when we get the belt on there. All right, so next we're gonna install the bypass O-ring on the lid passage, and then just grease that and then install that. So that's gonna be here. This is on where the intercooler brake is at. So this is gonna get installed right into this passage right there. It says to use a generous amount. So whatever that means to you. All right, once we have the O-ring installed and lubed up, it is now time to install the lid. So it gives you torque specs, torque pattern, and then I think it looks like there's 3 bolts in the front that are going to be a different length. So check that. I'll get that out here in just a second. All right, once you have that lid on, you're gonna get the bolt kit, and we're gonna start locking everything down. Okay, so for the bolts, you're gonna get a bag of lid bolts, and then you're gonna have some that came off, or that were already on there. I took mine off when I set mine out for porting. So you're gonna have 17 of the short ones, and then 3 long ones up front, which are marked in green here. All of these are gonna be torqued to 90 foot-pounds, and you're gonna start at 1 and then go through the pattern. And then on bolts 3 and 5, you have a bracket for your EVAP, which is gonna go on here. So the tab's gonna be up when you install it onto the lid of the supercharger. So let's get all these bolted down, torqued down, and everything good to go. All right, once you have your lid torqued to spec onto the supercharger body. We're going to install the high side fuel pressure line, and so we're just going to go back and plug that in. All right, once we have the high side pressure fuel line attached, it will click the lock. I had to put everything down. I had to use 2 hands to get it on there. It was that tight. We're gonna move to the other side and get this fuel line, and if you haven't already, the fuel pressure sensor installed as well. So it's just going to go on, snap on. Make sure you click it and lock it. And then we are going to get the EVAP system on next from your stock intake. All right, so this next part with the EVAP, I had actually been fighting this because I did not know, or I didn't read properly, that this tube is supposed to replace the one on here. It doesn't specifically say that in the instruction manual. It just says to install with supplied 45 or 55 degree push fitting, but it doesn't say anything about cutting this off and replacing it with this, so the instructions are not very clear on that. I just happened to see a picture and it did not look like this same tube, so I went searching through all this crap and found this tube, and I'm assuming that this goes to it, so I'm just gonna, hopefully this is what it's supposed to be. If not, then I'm about to have to buy a new EVAP solenoid. So we're gonna cut this off and install this, and then reinstall this whole piece. Alright, now it says to push this on. Hey, look at there, it fits. Now we can move this any way we want. Alright. Let's get this installed. All right, looky there, that worked. All right, so this had to flip up versus the way it was down on the intake manifold, so everything would clear. So just make sure all these fittings, you press them in and everything locks. And should be good to go on that. And we'll move on to the next step. All right, so for the next part, we're actually gonna reinstall our hoses from our catch can. All right, we'll probably have to play around with placement for this, just because everything's going to change, because we still have coolant hoses that's going to go in there. Okay, so this next part, we installed the coolant overflow hose. So there is a check valve here. It's going to go closest to the coolant overflow tank. And then the other side is going to go to that 45-degree barb that we put into the filler neck. And you're going to have to get some needle nose down in there to get that clamp on. But the hose ends on this side and this side are two different sizes as well. So if you forget which way it goes, the larger hose end and the check valve goes towards your coolant tank, your overflow tank. And then the smaller hose end goes to the 45 on the water neck down there. So for the next part, we are going to install, what was it? Oh yeah, the idler pulley. So we're going to get the smooth idler pulley, spacers, and T-nuts, and install that. Okay, so what we're going to need is you're going to have your smooth pulley. So you get two, one ribbed, one smooth, so this is smooth. So we're going to do this with this stepped spacer, and then in the bag it comes with two other spacers. It looks like they are identical. Yeah. So we're going to use one of those, put this other one in the bag so we save it. And then in the bag is going to be this, what they call a T-nut. And then in the bag that we got those other bolts out for the bracket, you're going to have two of these larger cap sockets still left. So we're going to use that for this as well. So it says to install this, this is going to go behind the bracket. This is going to go behind the pulley. This is going to go in front of the pulley. And your bolt's going to go through here, and then you're going to bolt on. So it says to do it hand tight, so we'll just thread that in there until we get the belt on. All right, I don't know if it matters or not, but in the instructions it was showing that the thread size was up towards the hood, so that's the way I'm going to install it. It doesn't specify either way. All right, so that is on there, hand tight. Let's move along. Okay, so it looks like we're gonna install the ribbed idler pulley next, and we're gonna need another one of those bolts and a spacer and a bracket for, what is this? A circulating pump bracket, which I do not have in my truck, so we're just going to install that pulley. All right, make sure that aligns. Mine was a little off because it was stuck in between the bracket and the spacer. So I just checked that, make sure all this stuff spins freely. And we're gonna install the belt next. Actually, we're gonna install the supercharger pulley next. So install this hand tight. Okay. So we're gonna get these bolts, put them on hand tight, 5mm. Okay, now we can get the belt on. All right, shows you the way the supercharger belt is supposed to go on. Also, you might want to take a picture of this just so you can have a belt number just in case this decides to let go, and you can get a replacement. It's not going to be the stock length. So let's go ahead and get all this stuff on, and then we will start snugging down bolts. Okay, so before we put the idler pulley on, just make sure you get some anti-seize on there, which I forgot to do earlier, so this is going to be out of order. We're just going to look out of order. So get some anti-seize on there, and then torque this down to 30 foot-pounds. Okay, we still haven't torqued this down. I know this is already here. I had to go back and do this. So torque this down, don't torque this down. These aren't torqued down yet. Now we're gonna get to the belt. All right, so once this is installed, just check to make sure that the belt is in the grooves and runs the proper way. All right, oh, that looks good. It goes around. Alternator looks good. All right. Looks like the belt is good. Let's keep moving. Okay, so yesterday we left off. We had just got the belt put on the supercharger and wrapped it around. Now the next step is going to be to get your idler pulley torqued down. And in order to do that, you need to move your adjustment idler all the way. And then once that's moved, you can move this because it's on that little T-slotted bolt or nut. Pull this down, and then once it's pulled down, you're going to torque it down to 18 foot-pounds, and then you can release this. So I don't know how well that this is going to get shot, but this is what you got to do to get this done. So let me get this camera back on my head because I got to use both hands to get this done. Okay, and then once that is torqued down, just make sure all your belt's clear. I gotta move this one a little bit. All right, so once you get that done, make sure you torque down the bolts to the water pump and then also the supercharger pulley, which I've already done. All right, so this next part we're gonna move on, looks like to the cooling system. So the next thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna remove this closeout and this closeout on both sides. You've got two push pins here, and then you got 1, 2, 3 here, and then one at the top. Same thing with here, one at the top, 1, 2, 3, and then 2 here at the bottom. It states in here that the passenger side will not be reused, but the driver side will be reused. So let's get all those pins out and get both those pieces taken out. All right, we got both of those off. If you need to cut them, cut them. They sell these push pins at pretty much any auto parts store, so you can get new ones if you need to. So once those are out, we can move on to the next step. All right, so for the next part, we're actually going to remove this entire horn assembly. So you're going to need to unplug it and then remove the bracket assembly. Okay, once we remove the horn assembly, we are going to install the heat exchanger. So we're going to get all these parts, the heat exchanger, the bracketry, all that, and get that installed onto the vehicle. All right, so to install the brackets first, you're going to have a driver's side, which is left hand, and passenger side, which is right hand. You're going to install these first onto the truck so we can install the heat exchanger after that. You're going to get a bag of cooling system bolts. And then we're going to need this clip bolt, this, what do they call it here? Dowel nut. So we're going to install this dowel nut. Alright, so they give you a little piece of rubber inside there. This is going to slide into this notch. And then this is going to slide over this bracket from the condenser, hopefully. Might need to get a screwdriver to open that up. Alright. Then we're going to get this dowel nut. It's going to go, I don't know if you can see inside here. Okay, so it doesn't say anything about this in the instruction manual, but sitting here messing with it, it looks like this bracket is going to go in place where there is a bolt for the condenser. You're going to need to pull this out, put this J-clip in, that's going to bolt through, and then they give you a new bolt that's going to bolt through here. The bolt that was there previously is not long enough to fit in there, so you're going to have to use this one they gave you. It doesn't say anything in the instructions about taking that out and putting this in its place, but that is the only place that I can see that is going to be able to go. So hopefully that is in the correct position. So we will get the heat exchanger and put it up and see if everything goes on. If you can see here, this goes through here, that bolts down. You have a piece of rubber that goes around the bracket from the condenser, and then this slides over that to help secure that as well. So that's how that side goes on. And then those are torqued down, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to put the heat exchanger on first, get everything aligned, and then torque everything down. All right, so as you can see, I fit the heat exchanger up inside here. It's loose. Basically, this plastic piece is just really holding it up. I don't have anything bolted down yet. I wanted to get this placed. So you're gonna have a bag. It's gonna have these little spacers in there. And then you're gonna get 4 bolts, 2 for each side. So this is gonna go in, looks like, yeah. So the ridged side in. and these are 13 millimeter. All right, so we got that bolted in. So basically I kept the brackets on the side loose so I could get the heat exchanger to align with those spacers and those holes. So I got that bolted down first, and then I aligned the brackets up to get everything flush and then tighten those down. So once you get everything tightened and torqued to spec, we can move on to the horn relocation bracket. Okay, so for the horn bracket, we actually have to remove the horns from the stock bracket, and then it's going to be on the reverse side, so they're going to be facing out instead of in like they were before. Okay, now that we get those reinstalled and we've moved them to the other side, this can go on into the factory location, so this spaces them out from the heat exchanger. Then if the wiring harness is in the way, we'll just need to zip tie that. And that's it. All right, so I had to rotate mine to get this to even plug in. I didn't have enough slack. Doesn't really matter which way they're oriented, just as long as they're up and out of the way. And there's clearance there. That's all you gotta do. I don't think that's gonna interfere with anything. So the next thing that we're gonna do is, I believe, remove, I think it's this tab right here, but let me look. Okay, so it looks like we're gonna remove this portion right here to allow the hoses to come down. So we're going to cut here. I'm going to use my oscillating saw to just remove that real quick, and then we'll move on. Okay, so we're going to remove some of this portion of the plastic right there. Yeah. All right. Once we get that removed, should have enough clearance for these hoses to come down. I'm probably going to take some sandpaper. I'm going to clean that up real quick, and then we'll get moving. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, we are currently under the truck, and we're going to move on to installing the pump bracket assembly. So this is going to go to the furthest most point, so right here. So you're going to have two squares, two holes. So you're going to get your J-clip, and you're going to slide it through. Okay, so once you get your clip in, then you're going to install the bracket. They're going to have a bolt in there with a washer, which I don't really understand why they want that on there, because of the bolt that they put in there, but whatever. We're going to install this and bolt this up, and then we're going to get our pump and bolt it onto this bracket. Okay, we're going to get our bracket with the T-bolt there for the clamp, and we're going to put this around and lightly snug it up. Okay, so we have our pump installed. However, I don't know if you can see, is that this, I think it's exit tube is right underneath the frame, and so I cannot get a hose on there. So I have a call into Whipple to see if this is a known issue, if it gave me the wrong bracket to space it incorrectly. So I'm going to wait to hear back from them to see what the fix is for this, but we're going to continue on. We're going to get the hoses put on, try to get the rest of it done while we're waiting for Whipple to get back with us on this. Okay, so for the next part, the first hose that we're going to install is going to be this part number right here, which has a 90-degree on it, which is this one right here. Part number matches the book. So this is going to go into the bottom of the heat exchanger and into the intake or the exit, so the top tube of the pump, which currently is not spaced where I can get to it. So we're going to install this, kind of leave this loose until we figure out. If anything, I might just space that out myself with some flat stock, some longer bolts, washers or something if it comes to that. But we're going to get this up in there. You're going to need 2 of these hose clamps as well to get this installed. All right, once you got that on there, wait, that is tight, so hopefully you got some decent set of pliers or a hose clamp tool. So this is going to go down, and this is going to go into the top eventually of the pump. So since we can't put that in yet, we will move on to the next hose. Okay, so the next portion of the cooling system is going to be their surge tank. That comes with a bracket. You got 2 small bolts. This is going to slide underneath the factory overflow tank, and then this is going to bolt to that. All right, that's nice and secure. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so for the next tube that we're going to install is going to be the filler reservoir pump tube. So it's going to be this part number right here, and then also the overflow, which is going to be in this bag. So it would be 3098 part number. So you're going to secure both the reservoir, and it's going to go into the intake of the pump, and we're going to put hose clamps on both of those ends and secure that. All right, once you get that secured, then we can get the overflow hose done. All right, I'm assuming that it's supposed to just go onto the ground because it does not say to connect it to anything. Okay, well, we'll just move on to the next one. So the next one is going to be 3092. This one, yes. So this one is going to go from the reservoir to the supercharger on the driver's side. All right, now that we got that driver's side hose put on, the last hose is going to go from this upper on the heat exchanger to the driver's side, or passenger side. All right, now that we get that routed, we can move on to the next step. Okay, so Whipple just got back with me on this, and even though this says it needs to be straight up and down, they said you can clock this to clear the frame to be able to put the hose in. So I'm loosening this up. I'm gonna rotate this down a bit. Get this hose. See if I can put it in there. Actually, I need to move that. All right. Once we got that on, get this thing locked down. And I might move it back over, depending on if I got room. Okay, so once we have that hose in there and it's not kinked or bound up, go ahead and retorque this down, and then we can move on to the throttle body. All right, the next portion, after we've just messed with all that nonsense, is to install the throttle body. If you have purchased a stage 2 system like I have, it will come with a new throttle body, a gasket, losing my mind here, and bolts. Now it tells you how to torque them, so you're going to have one pass at 89 inch-pounds, second pass at 139 inch-pounds. You have one longer bolt, which is going to be obvious on where it's going to go. It's going to go into this slot. All the rest of these are shorter. So let's get this thrown on. And I think it's going to be a 5mm. Okay, so once we've got that in there, we just need to torque them down. So this first pass is going to be 89 inch-pounds. Second's going to be 139. I'll go look at it again. All right, and then we're in the second pass, which I just forgot what the number was, even though I just said it. It's my ADD and dyslexia. 139. $25, $35, $39. All right, that is torqued down. Now we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so once you get the throttle body on, you're going to want to get your extension harness plugged in. Make sure it gets all the way, and then lock it down, and then check to make sure that it's not going to come into contact with the belt. Looks like there's plenty of room. I might zip tie that just in case, but that is done. Now the next part is going to be reinstalling the entire grill assembly as you put it on. So just reverse everything you did to when you remove the grill. It's going to go opposite, going back on. So we'll get that thrown back on. Okay, before we get the grill put on, there's something that I missed, and that is the stock heater hose connection. So I thought that this was going to be able to work with this, but the way that the fitting is, because of the 45, maybe a 55, and the way this hose routes, you wouldn't be able to get this in there without this hose hitting the supercharger pulley. So in the kit, they actually give you a new heater hose and connection, which is all loose. So I think though, so this is the stock connection. And then they give you, where the hell did I just put that? Okay, what the hell? Yeah. So they give you a 90 to go in there. So hopefully I can get this to orient properly and get that on there. All right, looks like that's gonna work. I'll just zip tie all this stuff out of the way so nothing comes into contact with the heater hose. So yeah, just get that zip tied. Now we'll get the front done. All right, so after we get the grill assembly back in and then the filler panel back in and everything bolted back up, we are basically in the home stretch here. We're gonna install the Whipple air intake. A couple things you gotta do though is these grounds that are here, you're gonna need to bend down so they don't come into contact. Make sure everything else out of the way. I might have to relocate this, I'm not sure yet. I might just have to run it on the outside here. But we're gonna fit this in, so this is gonna go back and push in where it did factory. So hopefully this goes back in. All right, that took a little bit of work to get in there, but that sits down there. So then you just need to put your push pins back in, and then we can move on to installing the piping to the throttle body. All right, so for the next part, you're going to get your intake tube, and there is a grommet in the pack where the throttle body gasket was. So that's going to go and get inserted into the intake tube, and then you're going to put this hose barb that you're going to plug your clean side back into. All right, so you got that there, and then we're gonna get our couplers and band clamps and get this installed. So there are two different size silicone tubes, one for the throttle body and one for the air box. So just make sure you put them on the right side. It pretty much can only go one way. All right, so we've got the intake installed, and honestly, it took me quite a while to fit all this in. So I'm just gonna give y'all a heads up. So this is gonna need to go in multiple pieces. You're gonna need to put the base in first, then your tube, then you need to fit this in. Now, when you go to tighten all of these down, inside the base here, there are brass knurled press fit nuts that are pressed into the plastic. Those are all pieces of crap. This is the biggest piece of crap intake I've ever installed in my entire life. Just by going and hand torquing these bolts down, so it's supposed to be 50 inch-pounds. I didn't even get to 50 inch-pounds before 3 of those knurled brass nuts pulled completely out. So if that happens to you, what I did is mix up some JB Weld, got the brass knurled nuts and put JB Weld on the bottom and then around the sides of where the knurling is. Got a torch and heated up the plastic a little bit so it was soft. You're not trying to burn anything, you're not trying to melt anything, you're just trying to get it soft. I repressed all of those knurled brass nuts in there with JB Weld, and then JB welded around the edge of the top of the knurled nuts, and then let it sit overnight, sanded it or filed it flat, and now I got it reinstalled. But just to let you know, to be careful when you're tightening this down. It obviously does not take much, because I was using hand tools, not even any power tools, and they pulled straight out. And then it's been a fight trying to get this and everything in here. I mean, this wiring connection here, the hood strut brace here, trying to fit everything around here. I actually had to use a pry bar to move everything out of the way, so it's a pain in the butts, and they need to change this design, honestly, for these trucks. But we'll get moving on to the next portion of it. So that's going to be the wiring harness for the coolant pump for the heat exchanger. So let's get that and get that hooked up, installed, zip tied up, and then I think we're going to be ready pretty soon for fluid changes and starting. Actually, one quick thing before we move on to the wiring harness is we need to reinstall our clean side separator or tubing if yours is stock. But since I had replaced this already, we're going back in with the clean side separator, and that will just snap back on, and that's it for that. So the wiring harness, you're going to come over here to the passenger side. There's going to be a fuse panel. You're going to pull this up to expose all the fuses. I'm not sure, it's just that side. Okay, yeah, so it is this most left one, because you got two covers here. Actually, you do need that. All right, let's take this off too. All right, so let's remove this wiring harness block that's attached into here. It's just a pinch clip, and then remove this piece as well, because I think we're going to need to get into one of these lugs for power, I believe. So the instructions say that you're going to have to notch this corner right here. So we're just going to go in here and cut a little portion out for the wiring harness to get to fit through. So let's notch that real quick. All right, now that you got that cut, however, which way you want to do it, we're gonna get the wiring harness. So the wiring harness will be this piece right here. You'll have your relay, your fuse. This is going to be power and fused switch. This is going to go to the pump that's below, and you should have a ground there. Here we go. And then you're going to ground it here. So this fuse, or this relay, there is a spot below the battery tray that has a hole in it that you're going to put this push pin through and push that pin on there, and that's going to capture that relay. So then you can start running the rest of the wiring harness. Okay, so you're going to run power and ground over towards the relay box, because I think I'm going to use this ground right here by the fuse block, and then power and ground goes there, and then we're going to run our plug down towards the bottom. And let's kind of pull this through and get that zipped up and situated here in a minute. Okay, so let's see which power that's going to go into. Alright, so we need 10 millimeter to go that one. Alright, so you are going to remove this nut, which is going to be the corner positive switch line. So remove this, and you're going to put this red marked eyelet underneath there. Okay, now that we've got the positive on there, we're going to run negative to this post, which that looks like that is an 8 millimeter. All right, once we got the negative tightened down, get the fuse amp put in to position F23. Okay, so I did some digging and found the instruction manual to the Ford Performance. So this is the warranty version of the Supercharger on Whipple's website. And they actually have a section on here for 2024 and up, fuse locations for the fuse. And in this instruction manual, it says to do F49. So F49 is going to be, let's see, this third slot, you'll have a 5, a 30, and then another 5. So we're going to pull this 5 and then reinstall it into the empty slots on this fuse block. And then reinsert this where we took that 5 out. So let's get that pulled out, put this in, and then we can move on to our coolant. Okay, so I just wanted to show how I ran the line down to the pump. So if you can see, it comes down here, and then I zip tied it to this wiring harness that goes at the bottom of the motor. You got your AC lines here, your balancer. So I zip tied it there, then ran it actually in front of the oil drip spout, and then ran it up and bundled it up, and then attached it to the exit side of the pump, up out of the way. Hopefully that is out of the way when I do an oil change. It looks like it's going to be, so that one should be fine. It's not near anything that's moving. So So we'll see, but we got to do an oil change on this thing because Whipple wants you to change your oil to 5W50. So that is one thing that we've got to do as well. All right, now that we got everything wired up, zip tied up, and checked, we're going to start refilling fluids and changing the oil. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add coolant. They want you to add a bottle of water wetter. I'm going to use VP Racing additive, same thing. And this is just to help coolant performance. So we're going to add this and then start filling the rest of it up with the coolant that we took out. And then if we need any more, we'll add as we go. We're going to need to purge this system of air. All right, once we have the fuse all done, we can go ahead and get our negative battery cable onto the vehicle. It's probably gonna make some weird noises because it's been off for a while. And get this tightened down. All right, once we've got that done, we can fill up our coolant and then start purging the system. One thing I forgot to mention is if you haven't already, make sure you reconnect your fuel pump relay to the fuel pump box. Make sure that's clicked and in there before you move on. So now we'll move on. All right, the next thing we're going to want to do is turn the key turn the vehicle on. You're not going to start it, but you're going to turn it on to power, to accessories, to let the pump turn on and start filling up the system. You're going to have to watch the overflow and just keep filling stuff up as you go to get the system to purge and get all the air bubbles out and get water in there. All right, what? Okay, also remember to add a bottle of either water wetter from Redline. I'm using VP Racing's Cool Down, either one. There's quite a few out there. Any of them will be fine. And introduce that into the system as well. That'll help keep temperatures a little bit lower. All right, so after we have purged the air out of our cooling system for the supercharger, we're going to move on to changing out the oil. Just on the supercharger coolant, you're going to have to cycle it on and off to purge the air out of the system. Might take you 10, 15 times. It took me a little bit to get most of the air out. I think I'm pretty much there. Might have to do a drive cycle to make sure that there's no air in the system. But after that's done, we'll do the oil change. So what you're going to need is, I'm using AMSOIL, but you're going to need 5W50 per Whipple's instruction manual and an FL500 oil filter. And I believe it's 7 quarts, if I'm not mistaken, to get that oil pan filled up. So let me get this done and we'll move on to the next step. Now that we've got the oil change done, it is time to download the tune that you requested from Whipple. So this should have been the first thing you did before you even started this, is request your tune file. So we're going to turn the truck on to accessories, plug up the Tomahawk, and let it do its thing. So it should basically be tuning and writing the code. A couple of buttons you might need to push, but it's doing its thing. All right, once it does its thing, I believe we go to programming, press enter. I guess push enter again. Okay, there we go. All right, so it's gonna go through its process. So let it do its thing and we'll be back. All right, once it gets done, it'll say program complete. After that, you're gonna cycle the key off for 5 seconds. And then back on. And then you're going to go to diagnostics, press enter. See if it has any diagnostic. So no diagnostic code, so we are good to go. All right, after that you can start the vehicle. All right, so we are here for the initial start, final phase, crossing my fingers that this thing starts. When you pressurize or when you turn the accessories on, make sure you have no fuel leaks or coolant leaks or any kind of leaks before you start the vehicle. So here it goes. I kind of want to throw up. Woo! Holy shit. Oh my God. That's awesome. Woo! All right, so next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna check coolant, make sure all the levels are cool, make sure everything is topped off and everything is okay, nothing's leaking. But that's it. That is, oh, that's a lot of work. Oh my God. That's awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this initial stage of the Whipple Supercharger. So we're going to have more to come. We're going to get it dynoed. We're going to take it to the track, but first we're going to do some braking procedures for this thing. Make sure that the coolant has no air in it. Make sure everything's topped off. Everything is good. So if you would, please go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification and like button, and share this out to anyone that would like to know how to install a Whipple, even though it's a big pain in the ass. Catch you later.